This is the history of a person that was brave and stood up to treachery when most didn't dare to. Sophie Scholl. Sophie Scholl was born in Germany in the year of 1921, and she was brought up as a Lutheran Christian. In Sophie's youth, she loved to read and spend time in the great outdoors of the countryside. In general, she just liked to have fun. In 1933, when she and one of her brothers, named Hans Scholl, were young, they joined the Hitler Youth Groups. As a part of the Hitler Youth Group, Sophie grew uneasy about the conflict between her beliefs previous of her joining the Hitler Youth Groups and the beliefs she was confronted with by joining the Nazi organization. Years later, from her days in the Hitler Youth Groups, she found a job in 1940 as a kindergarten teacher. But 2 years later, in May 1942, she enrolled at Munich University. Munich University offered classes such as philosophy, biology, psychology, etc. At Munich University, Sophie Scholl studied biology and philosophy, but more importantly, she started a group called the White Rose with her brother Hans Scholl. The group, the White Rose, adopted their name as a symbol of purity, which they were during the darkness of the Nazi rule. She may have been afraid of what might happen for revolting, but as she said, stand up for what you believe in, even if you are standing alone. The members of the White Rose were Hans Scholl, Alexander Schmorl, Willy Graf, and Christoph Probst, all of them being in their early 20s. Other members of the White Rose included Hans and Sophie Scholl's sister, named Inge Scholl, Kurt Huber, who was a professor of psychology and philosophy, and, of course, Sophie Scholl. During the active years of the White Rose, Sophie Scholl was engaged to Fritz Hartengel, a soldier who later married her sister, Elizabeth Scholl, after Sophie's execution. By the age of 18, Hans' eyes were open to the inhumane and unjust politics of the Nazi Party. Christoph Probst, a member of the White Rose, was raised by both of his parents, but his father, Hermann Probst, was his greatest influence. As a young man, Christoph attended liberal boarding schools at Marquartestein and Schondorf. Willy Graf was born in Kuchenheim, Euskirchen, and when he was younger, he refused to join the Hitler Youth Groups, for they went against what he believed was right. He was also the only member who wasn't involved with the Hitler Youth Groups, besides Kurt Huber. The White Rose was inspired by it, as well as actively supported by Kurt Huber, who was a member of the group himself. Sophie Scholl and the White Rose were protesting Germans' limits to their personal rights, like freedom of speech. The White Rose was also fighting against the mistreatment of Jewish citizens. All of the things the government was doing was proving to be unjust. People, even if there were few, opened their eyes to these treacherous acts of the German government because of reading the White Rose's leaflets. Sophie and the White Rose passed out leaflets that protested against the Nazis and their treacherous ways. In German, the leaflets were called Flugblätter der Weißen Rose, which means leaflets of the White Rose. The leaflets were written using the information that Sophie Scholl learned from taking a course in philosophy, so in writing the leaflets, the White Rose quoted famous philosophers. Sadly, one tragic day, their protesting was put to an end. The White Rose was so impressed with the Stalingrad catastrophe on February 2nd, 1943, that Sophie and Hans threw a bundle of leaflets into the inner court of Munich University. The janitor saw them, and they ended up being arrested for something so peaceful as their protest. After the arrest of Sophie and Hans and the finding of the leaflets, they were able to trace them to the rest of the White Rose organization, as well as its members. At Sophie Scholl's trial, she defended herself by saying, "Somebody, after all, had to make a start. What we wrote and said is also believed by many others. They just don't dare express themselves as we did." The words she said were very true, and it's a sad thing that more people did not stand up against the Nazis because of their fear. However, fear should never control people's actions when they are standing up for something that they truly believe in. Despite these words, she was held by the authorities for she was convicted of high treason, a crime punishable by death at that time in Germany. They were held in Stadelheim prison until the day the authorities silenced their protesting by executing them by guillotine. Sophie Scholl's last words were, "How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give himself up to such a righteous cause? Such a fine sunny day, and I have to go. But what does my death matter if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?" Even after the sad ending to Sophie Scholl and the White Rose's life, their sixth leaflet was found by the Allies and distributed across Germany, so at least their work lived on, and they were not forgotten by Germans. The White Rose was not forgotten because they brought attention to the wrathful, foul, and wrongful cruelty of the Third Reich, right up until the moment they were killed. In fact, they were remembered in all kinds of ways. There have been 3 movies made about Sophie Scholl. There have been streets, monuments, even a top literary prize named after the White Rose and its members. It was an amazing thing that they did, standing up to the pure evil, even when no one else would. They may have been punished for that, but they were strong and never gave up their revolt until they were executed. So let us never forget the impact they had on Nazi Germany and the world as we know it.